Okay, so now let's discuss Splunk installation on Linux, and then ultimately we're also going to demonstrate how to install Splunk Enterprise on Ubuntu Linux. Again, the first thing that you have to do, you have to go to the Splunk website, access the trial package as we've already seen before, and then you go to the tab that has Linux. What you're going to notice for Linux is that there are three different installer options that correspond to different distributions of Linux. So you have an RPM package that if you're using something like Red Hat Linux or CentOS, that's going to work for you. And then there's also a Debian package. So if you have like Ubuntu Linux, then you're going to download the .deb package. And then the third one is a tar file, which can be used for different distributions. And then so all you need to do really is to download the installer that corresponds to your own distribution of Linux. Now, let's see how you do the installation for these different distributions. The first one we're going to see here is the RPM package. So when you download the RPM package, you have to install the downloaded package using CLI on your Linux. It is recommended to put the package in the /opt folder. So when you put it in the /opt folder and then you install it there, it's going to create a subdirectory called Splunk. So ultimately, you're going to have opt/Splunk, and opt/Splunk is the home directory of Splunk in Linux. So it's like we saw for Windows that it's program file /Splunk. For Linux, it's opt/Splunk. That's the default home directory. And in order to install it there, you have to use the RPM package manager. So basically, you just use the RPM tag I, and then you use the package name. That's going to do the installation for you. But the opt/Splunk is the default home directory for Linux. It doesn't mean that that's the only place that you can actually install Splunk. So you can specify a different home directory. If you choose, for example, that you just want to put in another directory under the opt folder, you could use the RPM tag I and then you use the prefix in order to point to the new directory where you want to perform your installation. The next one we're going to look at here is the Debian package. So with the Debian package, all you need to do again, use the CLI you have to download and put it in the opt folder, just as we've seen for the RPM package. And then when you install there, it's going to create what you call the opt/Splunk again, which is your Splunk home. Now with the Debian package, you're going to use the Debian package manager, which is giving you this command dpkg tag I. So it just basically means that install this package. And then you also have to note that with the Debian package, you can only install it in opt/Splunk, which is Splunk's default home. You cannot install that in an entirely new directory. Now, what about the tar file? So you download the tar file again, and then all you need to do is to go to CLI and then copy the contents of that tar file into the opt folder, and then you have to go there and expand the tar file using the tar command. So when you expand that, the contents are going to be in opt/Splunk, which is your home directory. And of course, you can also install this in a different directory by using this subsequent command. So just as we saw for Windows, there are some post-installation steps that you have to perform when you install Splunk on Linux. This is to ensure that Splunk functions correctly without any interruptions. The first thing you have to do is to start Splunk. So you go to your Linux shell and then you navigate to the opt/Splunk/bin folder. As we said before, again, opt/Splunk is your default home directory where Splunk lives, and then you navigate to the bin folder. So the bin folder contains a Splunk binary, which you can pass commands to. Just as we saw that for Windows, it was program file /splunk/bin. And then when you go in there, in that directory, as you navigate there, then you have to use this command here in order to start Splunk. So when you do /Splunk start, it's going to start Splunk for you. Now, something is going to happen here that is a little bit different from what we saw with Windows. With Windows, we saw that when you are installing Splunk, you accept your license agreement and then you set your username and password credentials that you're going to use to log into your instance as an administrator. With Linux, you set these to when you are starting Splunk, not when you are installing Splunk. So in the process of starting Splunk, it's going to ask you to accept the license agreement. And then it's also going to ask you to provide the username and password credentials that you're going to use to log into your instance as an administrator. Now, the other thing that you need to do is to enable boot start. This is important because let's say that you install Splunk on a Linux machine, and then for some reason you restarted that Linux machine. There is no guarantee that Splunk is going to start automatically. So you have to perform this configuration so that anytime you reboot your Linux machine, Splunk is automatically going to start. So in order to do that again, you have to navigate into the bin folder there, and then after navigating into the bin folder, you have to use this command here in order to enable boot start. So once this is performed, you now guarantee that anytime that you restart your Linux machine, Splunk is automatically going to start. Now, what follows next? At that point, you are already done with the installation, starting Splunk, enabling boot start. So you want to log into your instance and start using it. So you have to log into Splunk Web, which is the number one way to use and administer Splunk. Everything here is the same like we discussed for Windows. So you're gonna use your default port, which is 8000. If you've installed it on a local instance again, you can just use your local host and then put your port number to log in. But if you have installed Splunk on maybe a remote instance that has an IP address, this is just an example, then you have to put the IP address in place of the local host. And then it's going to give you your login prompt here, which you can then go ahead to put the username and password that you configured when you were starting Splunk. Then you'll be able to log into your instance. Okay, welcome to the demo for Splunk Enterprise installation on Linux. All right, so we're going to install a trial package again. We're going to go to the Splunk website, download the trial package and install on Linux. And now, what is our Linux machine in this specific case? So what we've done is go to Microsoft Azure, and then we kind of initiated a virtual machine and then use Ubuntu Linux as the operating system on that, right? And as we said, this is going to be a remote instance. So in that process, it's going to give you an IP address that you can use to log into your instance. We're not going to see those steps of the virtual machine here. But note that one important thing that we did during the process is to go to that machine and then change the security groups of firewall at the instance level to allow for port 8000 because that's the port on which Splunk Enterprise listens. Okay, so we're just going to go back here, our free trials and downloads. And then when we go here, we're going to go to Splunk Enterprise. So again, we saw three packages here, right? We're trying to install the trial package. Now again for Linux. So since I have a login already, I can just go here and log in, or I can log in from here as well. All right, so now it's logging me to Splunk. All right, now that we're logged in, we installed the MSI package, right? That's what we did for Windows. So now we're going to go into Linux. And you see again, three different installers as we saw here for Linux, the DB, the TAR, and the RPM. But because we are using Ubuntu, which is Debian Linux, right? We're going to go and just use the DB package here. Remember, there are two things you can do here. You can either just download this package completely. You click here, it's going to start downloading for you. That's option one. Or you can just stop the download and then you copy the download link from here and do it directly on your virtual machine. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to close this. And then I'm going to come here and go here to this wget command. So this is just the same command that you can use here. And then you'll be able to download while you're connected directly to your instance. So I just spoke of the Linux virtual machine. This is the connection. So we are connected to it right now. And what I'm going to do, let me first of all see which directory I'm in. But because I really want to put this package in the OPT, so what I'm going to do, I will go to change to OPT. Remember, we said that that's where we want to copy. So I'm going to download it there by just pasting this link here. And then I do that. Okay, it says access denied. I think I need to do sudo for that. So sudo. Okay, so it's downloading my package now. So you see, I don't really have to download it in my downloads folder and then copy it into the virtual machine. Go here now and just list what I have. You see that I have my package here. So one of the things that is going to happen is that most of these commands, we are logged in as my user for this virtual machine, which you see here. But then most of the commands require root privileges. So in order to make sure that those commands are executed, we're going to be using sudo a lot. So switch user and do, which is going to enable us to run this command. So our package is here now. The first thing we can do is to install the package. And remember that we said with Ubuntu Linux, you have to use the Debian package manager. So you're going to do, I think you have to use sudo for it, dpkg minus tag I, which is for install. And I'm just going to copy this package and then I'll paste it here. Okay. All right. Oh, sorry, I typed it wrong. DP, not DB. Okay, let's do that. All right. So now you're seeing that it's installing it for us. Okay, so now installation is complete. And so at this point, we're just going to navigate to Splunk Home. Remember, we said that when we install Splunk on Debian, what's going to happen is that you just have to it's going to install it in the default home folder, so you are not able to specify anything else. So I'm going to do cd opt splunk here, so it puts us in there, right? If we list that, let me just make sure that it's maybe too much. So you see that as we're going, we have the bin folder there. So the bin folder is where we want to go into. So now, what are the things that we're going to do? After we did the installation, we saw the post-installation steps. We said that for Linux in particular, you have to start Splunk. And then it's during the process that you're starting Splunk that you're going to have to accept the license, and then you're going to have to configure the credentials that you then use to log into your instance as an administrator. And then we saw that you also have to enable boot start, because if you don't enable boot start in Linux and then you happen to maybe restart this Linux virtual machine, Splunk is not going to start automatically. And then after that, we are going to see how we can log into the Splunk Web UI. So in order for us to start Splunk, we have to be in the bin folder, because that's where the Splunk binary lives, right? So we're just going to navigate to bin. So now we are in ops Splunk bin. You can now do sudo. I'll do Splunk start. So I'm starting Splunk, but I'm going to use this tag here to allow Splunk to accept the license automatically. Remember, we said that there is a command argument that you can use for this. So we are passing this in so that we don't have to read the entire license. It's just going to automatically accept the license. And then when we do that, it's now going to ask us to configure the credentials that we have to use to log into Splunk. So I'm going to again just do my admin and now put the password. All right. So you see that it's starting Splunk for us now. Okay, so now Splunk is completely started. So at this point, we can log into Splunk Web. But what we're going to do is to enable boot start, just to make sure that if this instance, as we said again, our Linux restarts, and Splunk is going to start automatically. So let me clear my screen here. Clear. And then I'm just going to go there again and then pass Splunk enable boot start. Okay, so when I do that, then now boot start has been enabled for us. So we have enabled boot start now with Splunk is started. So let's try and see. We want to log into Splunk Web. Remember we said that the Splunk Web port, I'm going to do sudo Splunk show web port is port 8000. Do this. I think it's going to ask me to put my Splunk credentials here. All right, you see that's the port number there. So now, since we are using a virtual machine, we have a public IP address that was provided at the time of when you created that instance in Azure, right? We're going to use that public IP address, and then we're going to give it the port 8000 in order to log into that instance. So I'm just going to copy my public IP address here, and then I'll come to the browser, and maybe I'm just going to open up a new tab here, and I'll do HTTP paste my IP address, and then I'm gonna put port 8000. All right, so you see that it has given me the login prompt. So now I can log into Splunk. Oops, sorry. All right, there we go. So now we are logged into the Splunk Web. We've successfully installed Splunk on Linux, and then we've logged into Splunk Web. So again, as we said for Windows, we're not gonna go into the details of this, as we're gonna have a module that will speak about Splunk Web UI.